Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined by Mickie Kennedy. Mickie lives in Baltimore and has founded eReleases 25 years ago to help small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility through Tier 1 press release distribution. Mickie, welcome to Revenue Rehab. Your session begins now.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I am excited to talk to you today, but before we jump into our topic, I like to break the ice with a little woo-saw moments that I call buzzword banishment. So tell me, what industry buzzword would you like to get rid of forever?
Give 110%. It's not possible mathematically, so it just always irritates me.
Yeah, it is. It's at some point giving 100% became something that seemed to not be sufficient, and so people started going for the 110. And I'd really like to know where to get that extra 10% of effort, because it'd be lovely in a lot of ways if I had a little more energy there.
Right.
So I can promise for our discussion today that I will not ask you to give us 110%. So now that we've gotten that off our chest, tell me, what brings you to Revenue Rehab today?
Today I wanted to talk about how micromanaging your team can really throttle your growth and make it miserable for your staff. And I could go a little more in detail about that. But to explain, I am not a business major. I was actually pursuing a master's of fine arts in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry. And I finished that, I guess, around 27 years ago. And my career plan was to wait tables and write poetry. And I did that for a summer and realized that standing on your feet for 10 hours on concrete just kills your back and your knees. And I just felt so psychologically wasted at the end of every shift that I wasn't reading or writing. So I decided to pivot, which is another buzzword I'm not sure how I feel about, but I transitioned into a safe office job. I got hired at a telecom research startup in Washington, D.C., and I was employee number 3. And they just saw writing on my resume and said, hey, write releases and send them out to the media, as well as a million other things, because you wear a lot of hats in a startup. And so I did that, and I sent them out by fax, and not much happened. And I made it my mission to figure out what I was doing wrong. And I studied a lot of articles. And I think the big thing I noticed was journalists like to write with a story arc. And if you think about it, since we are children, we love stories, and stories usually have a rise and fall and a natural rhythm that is just innate. And I think that so many people write releases with the subject matter of we have this important information, and therefore you should write about us, but we neglect the journalist who has to write a story arc and how we can give the elements for that. And so we were publishing data. I think the most recent data that we had put out was a table of telecom traffic to and from the United States to Caribbean countries, and nothing happened. And then I, looked at it and said, where's the story here? And I realized that one of the countries had way more inbound and outbound traffic to the United States than all the others combined. And I looked into it and discovered that that was like a call center, that country for 1-900 numbers at the time, which were really popular. You could call for 75 cents a minute and get your horoscope, or $1 a minute and get advice on your cat or dog or something like that, as well as dating and things along those lines. And so when I wrote that as a story and had the data embedded within it, all of a sudden I got picked up by the Financial Times, The Economist, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and 3 telecom trade publications from that one single press release. And so I just started to, pull out the stories and let the stories lead. And I just had phenomenal success from that day forward.
Okay. And so I believe in setting intentions. It gives us focus and it gives us purpose. And so related to what you were talking about in terms of the problem of micromanagement and stifling growth and making employees miserable, what is your intention? What would you like people to take away from the discussion?
Right. So explaining that I didn't have much of a business background and I just sort of stumbled into my business as I added employees, I expected perfection. And, that's what, I felt like I was doing. And so I wanted every conversation that every employee had to be, as if I was saying it. I had learned in a marketing mastermind to try to never say no, but try to find a way to reframe the answer in a way that sort of partially satisfies the customer. And I could never get my employees to sort of adopt that. And, I was dealing with like most people leaving after a year and just not really happy with the staff. I was constantly grumbling about it. When I went to these marketing masterminds 3 or 4 times a year, I would just grumble about how bad things were with my staff. And after like a few years, one of the other attendees there was a HR specialist, and she mostly worked in corporate arenas in the UK. But she said, Mickie, you're wasting so much time with this marketing mastermind focusing on stuff that's not marketing. I can help you. I will interview your staff. I'll interview your customers. I'll look at your job postings and figure out what it is that you're doing wrong. And so she did that, and she came back to me and she was like, Mickie, you're the problem. The staff feels like they can never do anything right. You've never once praised them. You just, almost after every conversation, you're behind them, telling them what they should have done differently. And as a result of that, that's why people are just miserable. And so I decided that I was going to change. And then after like one day of catching myself out there, doing the same thing again with my staff, I just got them together and said, look, I'm going home. I'm going to focus on marketing and strategy and let you guys just provide great customer service. And I apologize that I haven't been a good coach and haven't really applauded how, what a great job you're doing. And I just nitpick and I can't help myself. And so there was someone there that was a little bit older than everyone else that they naturally looked towards because she had been there the longest. And I just said, Allison, I'm going to put you in charge. And, she is more of a mother figure where I was like the brutal father. And so I left in April of 2015, and almost everybody that was there at that time is still there. And the staff seem to be really happy. Turnover is gone, and we're triple the size that we were at that time. And I think that we probably wouldn't have been there if I kept my eye on my staff and wasn't focusing on the customer experience and strategy and building the company.
So it sounds like this story is almost like lessons from a recovered micromanager.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a really great thing to, number one, that you were open to that feedback and able to take that, because I do know sometimes as a leader, it can be hard to hear that you are the problem, or, whether it's hard to hear or just hard to recognize. And I do think that that's a very key, self-awareness is key for all leaders. But I'd love to hear, before and after, what were the impacts to the actual business? And this is, because there are a lot of people that I would say are very much like you were at that point, not even realizing that they are micromanagers, that they are, stifling their team's creativity and ability to do what they're best at. And so I'd love to hear, some of those, like, first, what is the business impact that you were seeing, before the change versus after? And then I'll also dig into some more of that, like, self-realization.
Right. So I think the biggest thing that I noticed was, uh, just how more relaxed people were. The staff were able to focus on their job. I had hired people who I felt had a customer service background, as well as being English majors and capable of editing, because so much of the job is customer service. But I didn't trust them after I hired them, and so for me, I relaxed. I wasn't stressed anymore. My blood pressure went down, and I think that even more importantly, the customers had a better experience because they're talking to the same person year over year, where before it was constantly a new person cycling in and out, as people were just leaving after a year. And so I felt like there was stability, and the customers were getting a better experience because as someone stays in a business, especially one like ours that's so data driven and procedure driven, that that familiarity with clients is special, and people like that, and they like being able to reach out and talk to the same person time and time again.
Okay. And so what I'm hearing is that your change in how you were dealing with your people impacted, like, overall customer satisfaction as well, because that very much trickled down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then after you heard that feedback, you articulated that you had some moments of, like, oh, I do this, I do that. And so for those listening who might be micromanagers and not realize it, what are some of the signs that someone has their thumb too heavy on their team?
I think for me, it is expecting not only for people to do their job, but to do it in exactly the same procedure as you. To have scripts and not allow someone to talk in their own voice and using their own words. I think that at the end of the day, people are humans, and they're going to talk in a way that is, feels natural for them. And I think that the moment you start putting exact phrases and exact language that they have to use time and time again, and to have everything so scripted, the customers hate it. I mean, we all know what we call a tech helpline, and we get the exact script, and you have to start from A to get to Z, but you want to pick up an M because A to L doesn't apply to you, but they just want to divert from it, and it just doesn't seem natural. The cadence isn't right, the tone isn't right, and I think that you really do a disservice when you don't allow people to actually be people. And I think that anybody who's worked with great salespeople know that it's personality driven, and their personality shines through. And when you control so much of the language that they use, and the exact way that they talk, it really breaks that down, and really, I think that you lose the customer in the experience.
Yeah, and I definitely would agree. And it's one of those things. It's almost like in the examples that you're given, like you're trying to clone yourself,
Right.
where it's like, and I think we all at some point have been stretched thin and have felt like, oh, I just wish I could clone myself. And, one of those things that I think becomes important for us to recognize as leaders is when you hire great people, they're going to bring unique talents, unique experiences, different perspectives, different ideas. And so there's a lot of value in them not doing things your way. Because, no matter how experienced we are, how amazing we are, we still, never know it all, never have, all of the best ideas. And I've been able to see, because I can say, I don't think I was ever a micromanager, but I definitely was a little bit of a control freak and did have, in the early stages of leadership for me, I did have some of those my way is the best way kind of tendencies. And one of the things that I saw, and it came from a very similar experience. Instead of it being an HR person, like I actually had someone who went to another leader and was like, she doesn't allow me to think. Like, I don't like working with her because she doesn't allow me to think. And that really hit me hard in that moment. And I had to, as you said, do some self-reflection. And, I quickly made a pivot because that was never my intent. I thought I was being helpful. And, what I've seen in, the decades since then is how much better the outcome is when it becomes a collection of ideas and thoughts. And so I still give my team, here are my thoughts, here's kind of how I would approach it. And they have, they understand me enough that when I'm saying this is how I'd approach it, that doesn't mean I'm expecting you to approach it this way. It is, I am throwing out what's in my head. If it's helpful, take it. If it's not, leave it. But I want you to do what you feel is best, because if I'm hiring someone, I am hiring them because I believe that they are amazing at that particular thing. And so I do think that that is a very important realization as a leader, to be able to, it is a level of trust. It is a level of relaxation in being able to relax, as you said, in that space, to give people the ability to just be really awesome. And that helps them to not be miserable. That helps them to grow your business. And that allows you to focus where you need to be focused. So I definitely echo your sentiment based on my own experience as well.
Excellent.
And so my other question for you is, what advice would you give? So if there's someone that's listening and they're recognizing like, this is kind of me, I probably lean in too heavy. As a leader, what advice would you give in terms of being able to make those changes?
I think for me, it's finding out what your strong suits are and how you best help the business. And for me, it was strategy and marketing. And so I knew that I didn't need to manage my day-to-day staff. And because I was bad at it, that made it really easy for me to sort of back away from it. I think the fact perhaps that, I am sort of like a poet, and I didn't know a lot about business and stuff like that. That when someone told me you're the problem, I immediately accepted it and tried to solve it, but didn't recognize almost immediately that this is like innate behavior. I don't think I'm easily going to be able to fix it, and so for me, I stepped aside. If you're running a small business and it's just you, and maybe you've hired your first person and you really can't separate yourself, is there a way that psychologically you can separate yourself? I mean, sort of like, I hired this person, I'm trusting them, I'm going to let them succeed or fail. And, when they need support, make it very obvious that you're available, but try not to constantly try to refine everything that they're doing. I guess I was constantly sanding all day long with the staff, and it was unbearable. I think that maybe if I was observing things that were just not, I felt ideal, then maybe we have a weekly check-in where I point out what they do good first, and then sort of address a couple of areas where I felt like they could use some improvement. And again, say, I'm here. I want you to succeed. I think you're doing a great job. But I as I see opportunities for improvement, I just want to point those out and see if you agree. And if you don't, let's try to compromise or find a way in which it could work. But I think that it is hard to navigate when you're just with one or two employees. I think that as you build more and more staff, I think at the time I had around 4 employees. It gets easier to delegate to another person who seems a natural leader, or perhaps hire into that position. But it's not easy, and I do recognize that I had the opportunity to be able to go away and just work from home and focus on strategy. And I also recognize that not everyone's going to have that opportunity. So how you actually solve your micromanaging tendencies, I don't know if you can, but I do know that I wasn't able to, or I didn't want to go through the effort of getting through that, because I recognize that it's easier for me to just, move and transition to what I really should be focusing on as the owner of the company. And that is to focus on strategy and education for my clients.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting perspective and realization about yourself, because quite often when we are faced with a challenge, it is the natural thought process is, okay, what do I need to do to change this behavior in me? And what I'm hearing and what you're saying is that sometimes the change in behavior is just remove yourself from the situation.
Right.
I think that it is a great it becomes a great perspective because it is a different approach. You put someone else in that role to do the thing that you weren't successful at, to allow you to focus your energies in the places that were not only the places where you were most successful, but that were more impactful for the business. And I think that became a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely.
And so talking about our challenges is just the first step, and nothing changes if nothing changes. And so in traditional therapy, the therapist gives the client some homework, but here at Revenue Rehab, I like to flip that on its head and ask you to give us some homework. And so I'd love to hear your one thing. If what you have said has resonated with our audience, what would be the first step that you would suggest that they take?
I think the first step would be to really be mindful of, are you supporting and being a cheerleader to your staff? That is part of the job. I mean, I think that you have to celebrate the wins with them. You have to recognize when they do good. I felt like as long as I'm giving you a raise, you're obviously doing something right, but that's not enough for people. People want to be told that they're doing well when they are doing well, and they want when they have a huge win to celebrate that. And so, make sure that you're doing that, because I was just blind to that and just assumed that, my employees didn't need that. And I didn't feel that I was overly negative, but, looking back, I wasn't providing any positive reinforcement. It was all just negative and nitpicking. And so I completely get it that it probably was miserable working for me at the time.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's always a good self-reflection. Well, Mickie, I have enjoyed our discussion, but that's our time for today. But before we go, how can our audience connect with you, and definitely give the shameless plug for eReleases so that we understand what you do?
Okay, so eReleases is a press release distribution platform. We offer a PR Newswire national distribution without you having to pay $1,600, which is what they charge for national distribution. It's a special rate for small businesses and entrepreneurs that we work with. And again, our website's eReleases.com. All of our social media is on the lower right. In the footer, we have a new customer special, so you can get in there and buy a release or a package of releases for the equivalent of $350 a release. And I also have a free video masterclass. I mentioned that I focus on education. It's basically recognizing the fact that 97% of press releases fail. And I think that's why so many people say press releases don't work. But what I've done, moving 10,000 releases a year, is focus on the 3% that do succeed, and sharing the patterns and the types of releases you should be focusing on. And that's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's completely free, less than an hour commitment, because I recognize the last 20-hour course I bought, I didn't finish it. So I really wanted to make it very simple and easy for people to understand. And it's a great place to start if you're considering PR, because if you build a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases and you follow this, you're going to be doing more strategic ones, and you'll probably have more successes than failures as you build your PR campaign.
Well, awesome. We will make sure to link to eReleases and the plan. So wherever you are listening or watching this podcast, check the show notes so that you can access that information. Well, Mickie, again, thank you for joining me. I have enjoyed the discussion.
Well, thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us. I can't believe we're at the end. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.